The massive alien ship dropped out of space above Earth like a thunderbolt from hell. Captain Jake Murphy nearly spilled his coffee all over the control panel when the alarms started screaming. The Earth Defense Station horizon shook as every sensor went crazy at once. "What the hell is that thing?" Ben Carter shouted from his position at the tactical station. His fingers flew across the keyboard as he tried to get readings on the enormous vessel that had just appeared out of nowhere. "Lisa." Park looked up from her communications console, her face pale. "Sir, it's huge. The computer says it's over 1 kilometer long." Amy Rodriguez pushed her glasses up her nose as she stared at her science readings. "The energy signatures are off the charts. This technology is way beyond anything we have." "Captain." Murphy set down his coffee cup and walked to the main viewing screen. The alien ship hung in space like a crystal cathedral, all sharp angles and gleaming surfaces. Strange lights pulsed along its hull in patterns that hurt to look at directly. "Any idea where it came from?" Murphy asked. "Negative, sir," Amy replied. "It just appeared. No hyperspace distortion, no energy buildup. 1 second empty space, next second this thing." The bridge crew worked frantically at their stations. Murphy had trained for this moment his entire career. But now that first contact was actually happening, he felt completely unprepared. 20 years in the Space Force and nothing had prepared him for this. "Sir, we're getting a transmission," Lisa announced. "It's on all frequencies at once, audio and visual." "Put it on screen." The main display flickered and changed. Dramatic. Music filled the bridge, the kind of thunderous orchestral piece that belonged in an old war movie. The screen showed images of burning cities, fleeing crowds, and massive explosions. Then the music reached a crescendo and the images faded to show a tall, crystalline figure. The alien stood at least 8 feet tall, its body made of what looked like living diamond. Faceted surfaces caught and reflected light in dizzying patterns. When it spoke, its voice boomed through the bridge speakers with the force of an avalanche. "Primitive beings of the third planet, I am Admiral Zexthul of the mighty Vorthak Empire. For 3,000 years we have ruled the stars. 47 systems bow before our power. Today, your world joins our glorious dominion." The alien raised one crystalline arm dramatically. Behind him, the bridge of his ship stretched away like a vast throne room, filled with other crystal beings standing at attention. "You will surrender immediately and unconditionally. Your leaders will present themselves for processing. Your military forces will stand down. Your people will serve the Empire as is proper for a primitive species." Ben Carter leaned forward in his chair, squinting at the screen. "Is this guy serious?" "Resistance is futile," the alien continued, apparently not hearing Ben's comment. "Those who oppose the Empire face only death and destruction. Your weapons are toys compared to our might. Your ships are insects before our fleet." Lisa covered her mouth with her hand, but Murphy could see her shoulders shaking slightly. "You have one of your rotations to comply," Admiral Zexthul declared. "Prepare your tribute of resources and population. The Empire will be merciful to those who submit with proper respect." The alien paused dramatically, letting his words sink in. The camera angle changed to show him from below, making him look even more imposing against the backdrop of his massive ship. "This is your only warning. The Vorthak Empire does not give second chances. Comply or face the consequences of your defiance." The transmission ended with more thunderous music and images of the alien fleet in formation. When the screen went back to showing the view of space, the bridge of the horizon was completely silent for about 5 seconds. Then Ben Carter snorted. It was a small sound, barely audible, but in the quiet of the bridge it might as well have been a gunshot. Lisa Park looked over at him, and Murphy could see she was biting her lip hard to keep from smiling. "Did that guy just threaten to blow up Earth while standing in front of mood lighting?" Ben asked. Amy Rodriguez pushed her glasses up again. The dramatic pauses were a bit much. "And the music," Lisa added, her voice slightly strained. "It sounded like something from a bad movie." Murphy tried to maintain his composure, but he had to admit the alien's presentation had been rather theatrical. "People, we need to focus. This is a serious situation." "Oh, absolutely serious, sir," Ben agreed, but there was still a slight tremor in his voice. Very serious, life and death. The fate of humanity hangs in the balance. The way he kept waving his arms around, Amy muttered, "That did it." Lisa Park burst out laughing. Not a polite chuckle, but full-blown laughter that echoed through the bridge. Ben joined in immediately, followed by Amy. Even the other crew members at their stations started grinning. Murphy felt his own composure cracking. The alien had been so incredibly dramatic, so over the top in his presentation. The whole thing felt like a parody of every alien invasion movie ever made. "Sir," Lisa managed to say between giggles, "should we send a response?" Murphy looked at his crew, all of them struggling to contain their laughter, then back at the massive alien ship on the screen. The situation was undoubtedly serious. Earth was being threatened by beings with superior technology and apparently aggressive intentions. But the aliens' approach was so ridiculously theatrical that it was hard to take seriously. "Get me a line to Earth Command," Murphy said finally. "We need to report this. And Lisa, make sure you include the full recording of their transmission." As Lisa worked to establish the connection, Murphy could hear crew members throughout the station starting to laugh as word of the alien message spread. Soon, he knew, the entire planet would be watching the dramatic alien admiral with his crystal body and thunderous demands. Somehow, Murphy suspected that Earth's response was not going to be what Admiral Zexthal expected. Admiral Zexthal stood frozen at his command station, staring at the communication display that showed Earth's response. In 3,000 years of conquest, this had never happened before. Ever. "Commander Velnoth," he called to his second in command. "Are you certain our translation systems are working correctly?" The smaller crystalline being checked his readings twice before responding. "Yes, Admiral. All systems are functioning perfectly. The humans are definitely laughing." Zexthal's crystal form darkened with confusion. "Laughing. They received the Imperial decree and they are laughing." Intelligence Officer Krelon stepped forward, her faceted surface reflecting the bridge lights nervously. "Admiral, our monitoring stations report the same reaction across their entire planet. The laughter appears to be spreading through their communication networks. On Earth, President Ryan Thompson sat in the emergency briefing room with his top advisors. The recording of the alien message played on the wall screen for the 5th time, and Defense Secretary Kate Williams was still shaking her head. "I'm sorry, Mr. President," she said. "I know this is serious, but that alien looks like he's auditioning for a role in a theater production." Scientific advisor Dr. Paul Johnson leaned back in his chair. "The technology is clearly advanced, but their approach to diplomacy seems stuck in some medieval concept of intimidation." Chief of Staff Linda Hayes pulled up her tablet. "Sir, the internet has exploded. There are already thousands of memes about crystal aliens. Someone created a remix of his speech with dance music." President Thompson rubbed his temples. "So we're being invaded by aliens and the entire country thinks it's a comedy show." "To be fair, Mr. President," Dr. Johnson said, "their presentation was rather theatrical." Back on the Vorthak flagship, Admiral Zexthal paced across his command deck. Every step rang against the crystal floor like a bell. His officers watched nervously as their commander struggled to understand what was happening. "Show me the recordings again," he demanded. The main display lit up with videos from Earth. Humans of all ages were watching the alien message and bursting into laughter. Children imitated the Admiral's dramatic gestures. Adults shared the video, with friends pointing and giggling at the screen. "This makes no sense," Zexthal muttered. "The decree has worked on every species we have encountered. Fear is universal. All intelligent beings understand the threat of superior force." Commander Velnoth cleared his throat carefully. "Admiral, perhaps we should consider that these humans are simply too primitive to understand the seriousness of our message." "No," Krelin interrupted. "Our scans show they have achieved spaceflight, nuclear technology, and complex communication systems. They are not primitive. They are choosing to laugh." Meanwhile, Ambassador Mary Collins was preparing for humanity's response. She sat in her shuttle with linguist Dr. Steve Martinez and cultural attaché Helen Garcia, reviewing their strategy for the upcoming meeting. "Remember," Collins said, We want to be diplomatic but not submissive. These aliens clearly expect us to be terrified, but that doesn't mean we should be rude. Dr. Martinez nodded. Their language structure suggests a very hierarchical society. They probably haven't dealt with equals in a very long time. Helen Garcia looked out the shuttle window at the massive alien ship. It's beautiful in a way, like a floating cathedral made of crystal. The shuttle docked with the Vorthak vessel without incident. The aliens had provided an atmospheric interface that allowed humans to breathe normally. Collins and her team walked through corridors that gleamed like the inside of a geode, everything sharp angles and reflected light. They were escorted to a vast chamber where Admiral Zexthul waited on what could only be described as a throne. The crystal being towered over them, clearly designed to intimidate through sheer size and presence. Humans, the Admiral began, his voice echoing through the chamber. You dare to approach the Eternal Dominion with such casual disregard for our power? Ambassador Collins stepped forward with a polite smile. Admiral Zexthul, thank you for agreeing to meet with us. We appreciate the opportunity to discuss our respective positions. The alien's crystal face somehow managed to convey confusion. Discuss. There is nothing to discuss. You will submit to the Empire or face destruction. Well, that's certainly one option, Collins replied cheerfully. But we were hoping we might be friends instead. Earth has always believed in the value of peaceful cooperation between different peoples. Zexthul's crystal form grew darker. Friends? You would be friends with beings who could destroy your world with a thought? Why would you want to destroy our world? Helen Garcia asked. It seems like such a waste. Wouldn't it be better to work together? Dr. Martinez stepped forward. Admiral, your technology is clearly advanced. We could learn much from each other through peaceful exchange. The alien commander looked from one human to another, his crystalline features reflecting his bewilderment. In every other first contact, representatives from conquered worlds had either cowered in terror or begged desperately for mercy. These humans were treating him like a potential business partner. You do not understand, Zexthul said slowly. The Vorthak Empire rules through strength. The strong command, the weak obey. This is the natural order. That's one way to look at it, Collins agreed. But humans have found that cooperation tends to produce better results than domination. We've tried the other way, and it didn't work out very well for anyone. Back on Earth, the reaction to the alien invasion continued to evolve in ways that baffled the Vorthak monitoring stations. Comedy shows were already creating skits about dramatic crystal aliens. Social media was flooded with jokes and parodies. Children were playing games where they pretended to be overly serious space conquerors. Tony Walsh, reporting for the evening news, stood outside the United Nations building where crowds had gathered to watch the alien ships through telescopes. The mood here remains surprisingly upbeat, he reported. Street vendors are selling Galactic Empire t-shirts, and someone has set up a food truck called Alien Invasion Tacos. It's like the whole city is treating this as some kind of festival. The camera panned across the crowd, showing people laughing and taking selfies with the alien ships visible in the background. On the Vorthak flagship, Intelligence Officer Krelon brought Admiral Zexthul the latest reports from their surveillance network. Admiral, we are receiving concerning communications from other sectors of the Empire. Several conquered worlds are asking questions about why they feared us in the first place. Zexthul's crystal form flickered with alarm. What kind of questions? They want to know why beings who can be made into internet jokes were ever considered. Terrifying. For the first time in his very long life, Admiral Zexthul began to suspect that the Vorthak Empire might have a serious problem. Dr. Angela Foster stared at her computer screen, watching alien broadcasts for the 15th time that day. Her team at the Xenobiology Research Center had been working around the clock since first contact, trying to understand these crystal beings who seemed so baffled by human reactions. Chris, come look at this, she called to Dr. Chris Davis, who was sitting across the lab analyzing Vorthak cultural patterns. The anthropologist walked over, carrying his coffee mug that read, World's Okayest Scientist. He looked at Angela's screen, which showed a recording of Vorthak ceremonies from their homeworld. See how they move? Angela pointed at the screen. Every gesture is calculated for maximum dramatic impact. They don't just walk, they stride. They don't just speak, they proclaim. Dr. Jennifer Moore looked up from her psychology texts. It's like they turned intimidation into an art form. But here's the interesting part. Our psychological profiles suggest they actually believe their own performance. Chris sat down next to Angela's workstation. I've been studying their conquest records. Every single species they've encountered has responded with fear, submission, or desperate resistance. We're literally the first civilization to laugh at them. But why do we laugh? Angela asked. That's what we need to figure out. Jennifer stood up and walked to the whiteboard, where she had been mapping human psychological responses. Think about our history. We've survived ice ages, plagues, world wars, nuclear weapons, climate disasters, economic collapses. As a species, we've faced extinction multiple times. And, Chris prompted. Humor is how we cope, Jennifer continued. When things get so bad, they're beyond our control, we make jokes. It's a survival mechanism. These aliens think they're presenting us with our worst nightmare, but we've already lived through our worst nightmares. Angela nodded slowly. So when they show up with their dramatic speeches about conquest and doom, it doesn't terrify us. It reminds us of every cheesy villain from every bad movie we've ever seen. Across town at the Pentagon, Colonel Sam Roberts was briefing General Patricia King about the military situation. The conference room was filled with charts, satellite images, and technical readouts of the alien ships. General, our assessment is that their technology is superior, but their tactics are completely predictable, Colonel Roberts explained. They rely entirely on psychological warfare. Fear is their primary weapon. General King studied the tactical displays. And when fear doesn't work, they don't seem to have a backup plan. Their formations are ceremonial rather than practical. Their approach to combat appears to be based on overwhelming shows of force rather than actual strategic thinking. So they're used to enemies who panic and make mistakes? Exactly. But humans under pressure don't panic the same way. We've been dealing with existential threats for our entire existence as a species. One more crisis just gets added to the list. Meanwhile, in New York City, news reporter Tony Walsh was covering the continuing public reaction to the alien presence. He stood in Times Square, where giant screens usually showed advertisements but now displayed live feeds from the alien ships. The scene here continues to be unlike anything we might have expected from first contact with an alien civilization, Tony reported. Instead of panic in the streets, we have street performers doing impressions of the alien admiral. Instead of people fleeing to underground bunkers, they're taking tours to get better views of the ships. The camera panned across the square, showing families with children, teenagers taking selfies, and elderly couples sitting on benches pointing up at the sky and laughing together. I spoke with Dr. Ruth Baker, a sociologist from Columbia University, about this phenomenon, Tony continued. She told me that humans have a unique relationship with authority figures who take themselves too seriously. We instinctively want to deflate them. The broadcast cut to an interview with Dr. Baker. Throughout human history, we've used humor to challenge power structures that seemed unbreachable, she explained. Court jesters mocked kings. Comedians mock politicians. It's how we remind ourselves that no one is as important as they think they are. Back at the research center, Angela's team was monitoring communications from other parts of the galaxy. The Vorthak Empire had extensive networks connecting their conquered territories, and human hackers had managed to tap into some of the less secure channels. Angela, you need to see this, Chris called out. He had intercepted a communication from a world called Keltor Prime, one of the Vorthak's oldest conquered territories. The message was from a being called Administrator Thulon to his underground resistance network. The humans have done something unprecedented. They have shown that the crystal overlords can be mocked. Our spies report that even Vorthak officers are beginning to question why we ever feared these theatrical fools. Angela felt a chill run down her spine. Chris, do you realize what this means? Our laughter isn't just protecting Earth. It's inspiring rebellions across their entire empire. Jennifer joined them at the communication station. The Vorthak built their power on a foundation of fear and respect. But respect based on fear is fragile. Once people stop being afraid, the whole system starts to collapse. They watched more intercepted messages flow across the screen. Similar reports were coming from dozens of worlds. The very thing that made the Vorthak Empire so effective for 3,000 years was now working against them. Dr. Foster picked up her phone and dialed President Thompson's direct line. When he answered, she spoke quickly and clearly. "Mr. President, Dr. Foster at the Xenobiology Center. We've made a breakthrough. The alien empire isn't just threatening Earth. They're facing a galaxy-wide crisis because of how we responded to them." Explain. "Their entire power structure is based on intimidation. When we laughed instead of cowering, we didn't just protect ourselves. We showed every species under their control that these aliens aren't as scary as they pretend to be. Rebellions are starting everywhere." There was silence on the other end of the line for a long moment. Then President Thompson spoke. "Doctor, are you telling me that our memes and jokes are accidentally starting a galactic revolution?" "Not accidentally, Mr. President. Inevitably. Humans have always been good at finding the weak spots in systems that rely on fear and intimidation. We just applied those skills to an alien empire." Angela could hear the president talking to his advisors in the background. When he came back on the line, his voice was thoughtful. "Dr. Foster, I want your team to prepare a full briefing for tomorrow morning. And Doctor, make sure you include recommendations for how we can help these other species without starting a war we can't win." As Angela hung up the phone, she looked around at her colleagues. They had started the day trying to understand why humans found the aliens funny. Now they realized they might be witnessing the beginning of the end of a 3,000-year-old galactic empire. And it all started with laughter. Admiral Zexthal's crystal form pulsed with dark energy as he stood before the tactical display on his flagship. The reports from across the empire were getting worse by the hour. 17 worlds had declared independence. 23 more were in open revolt. And it all started because these humans had laughed at the imperial decree. "Commander Velnoth," he called sharply, "prepare the orbital bombardment systems. We will show these humans what happens when they mock the Vorthak Empire." His second-in-command hesitated. "Admiral, are you certain this is wise? The destruction of Earth might only make the rebellions worse." "No," Zexthal replied firmly. "We will not destroy their world. We will destroy something smaller, something that will demonstrate our power without eliminating our newest subjects." He pointed to a tactical display showing the solar system. "There, that abandoned mining station in the asteroid belt. We will obliterate it completely and broadcast the destruction to Earth. When they see our weapons in action, their laughter will turn to proper fear." On Earth, Captain Roy Mitchell stood on the bridge of the command ship Defiance, watching the alien fleet through the main view screen. Admiral Susan Price stood beside him, studying the tactical readouts that her officers provided. "Admiral, the alien ships are changing formation," reported Lieutenant Commander Sarah Blake from the tactical station. "They're moving into what looks like an attack pattern." Admiral Price frowned. "Attack pattern? Show me their positioning." The main screen changed to display a tactical overview of the Vorthak fleet. The ships were arranging themselves in a perfect, geometric formation, with the flagship at the center and smaller vessels arranged in precise circles around it. "That's not an attack formation," Captain Mitchell said quietly. "That's a parade formation." "What do you mean?" Admiral Price asked. "Look at the spacing. No interlocking fields of fire, no tactical redundancy, no defensive screening. They're positioning themselves to look impressive, not to fight effectively." Lieutenant Commander Blake looked up from her station. "Admiral, we're receiving another transmission from the alien flagship." "Put it on screen." Admiral Zexthal appeared on the display, even more dramatic than before. Behind him, his bridge crew stood at attention like performers in an opera. "Humans of Earth," the alien began, his voice booming through the speakers. "You have shown disrespect to the mighty Vorthak Empire. This cannot be tolerated. Observe the price of mockery." The transmission switched to show external cameras from the alien fleet, their weapons powered up with elaborate light shows and energy buildups that took nearly a full minute to complete. "Jesus," Captain Mitchell muttered. Do they always take this long to fire their weapons? The alien weapons finally discharged, creating spectacular beams of energy that streaked across space toward the abandoned mining station. The station disappeared, in a brilliant explosion that could be seen from Earth with the naked eye. The transmission returned to Admiral Zexthul. This is the power of the Vorthak Empire. Submit now or face the consequences of continued defiance. When the transmission ended, the bridge of the Defiance was quiet for a moment. Then Captain Mitchell started laughing. Admiral, did you see? That weapon's charge time. 47 seconds from power up to firing. Any decent pilot could dodge those shots while eating lunch. Admiral Price nodded slowly. And their formation exposes their flagship to attack from 3 different angles simultaneously. It's like they designed their entire military around intimidating people who don't fight back, Lieutenant Commander Blake observed. Meanwhile, comedian Danny Clark was performing his latest routine at the Comedy Underground in Seattle. The small club was packed with people who had come to see his impression of the alien admiral. So this crystal guy shows up, Danny said, adopting an exaggerated dramatic pose. And he's like, "Fear me, tiny humans, for I am Admiral Zexthul of the mighty Vorthak Empire." The audience laughed as Danny gestured wildly, mimicking the alien's theatrical movements. And I'm thinking, dude, you realize you sound like every bad guy from every superhero movie ever made, right? What's next? Are you going to tell us your evil plan and then leave us alone in a room with an easily escapable death trap? The crowd roared with laughter. Unknown to Danny, his performance was being broadcast live on the internet, where it was being watched by millions of people on Earth and intercepted by monitoring stations throughout the Vorthak Empire. Back at the Xenobiology Research Center, Dr. Angela Foster and her team were analyzing the intelligence reports that had been flooding in since the weapons demonstration. The rebellion is spreading faster than we anticipated, Dr. Chris Davis reported. 31 worlds have now declared independence from the Vorthak Empire. Dr. Jennifer Moore looked up from her psychological analysis. The weapons demonstration backfired completely. Instead of scaring people, it showed how theatrical and impractical their military approach really is. Angela pulled up a communication from the Keltor resistance movement. Look at this message from Administrator Thulon. He says their local Vorthak garrison spent 2 hours preparing for a weapons test yesterday, including costume changes and lighting adjustments. Costume changes? Chris asked. Apparently the Vorthak have different uniforms for different types of military operations. They literally dress up for the occasion. At the White House, President Thompson was meeting with his cabinet to discuss the rapidly evolving situation. Defense Secretary Kate Williams had prepared a comprehensive briefing on the Galactic situation. Mr. President, we're looking at the potential collapse of a 3,000-year-old galactic empire, she explained. And it's happening because they can't handle being laughed at. Chief of Staff Linda Hayes pulled up her tablet. The social media response to their weapons demonstration has been incredible. There are already compilation videos of the alien admiral's dramatic poses set to pop music. Scientific advisor Dr. Paul Johnson leaned forward. Mr. President, we have an opportunity here. These rebellions could free dozens of species from imperial control, but they need guidance. The rebels don't have experience with self-governance. What are you suggesting? President Thompson asked. A cultural exchange program, not military intervention, but educational support. We help them understand how democracy works, how to build cooperative societies instead of hierarchical ones. General Kevin Brown, the military strategist, spoke up. Mr. President, our analysis suggests that the Vorthak Empire was held together entirely by psychological control. Now that's broken, but there's a power vacuum. If we don't help fill it with something positive, these worlds could descend into chaos. President Thompson considered this for a long moment. So you're telling me that our best weapon against an alien empire is not our military, but our comedians and political scientists? In essence, yes, sir, Dr. Johnson replied. We've accidentally proven that laughter and cooperation are more powerful than fear and domination. The president stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city where people continued to go about their daily lives, seemingly unconcerned about the alien ships hanging in orbit above them. Set up a meeting with Ambassador Collins, he said finally. And get me a direct line to this Administrator Thulon on Keltor Prime. If we're going to accidentally liberate a galaxy, we might as well do it properly. Meanwhile, on the Vorthak flagship, Admiral Zexthul was receiving reports that made his crystalline form darker with each passing hour. Admiral, Intelligence Officer Krelon reported nervously. We have lost contact with the governors of 47 worlds. The rebellion has spread to sectors we conquered centuries ago. How is this possible? Zexthul demanded. We destroyed their mining station. We demonstrated our power. Sir, the humans broadcast their analysis of our tactics throughout their communication networks. Other species saw how predictable our methods are. Commander Velnoth stepped forward carefully. Admiral, perhaps it is time to consider that our approach may need to change. Zexthul turned to face his subordinate, his crystal facets reflecting his anger. Change? The Vorthak way has ruled the galaxy for 3 millennia. Yes, sir, but the galaxy is no longer listening. Admiral Zexthul stood in the center of his throne room, his crystalline form flickering with desperate energy. The reports were catastrophic. 63 worlds had declared independence. The empire that had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years was crumbling, and it was all because of one small blue planet that refused to take him seriously. There is only one way to restore our honor, he announced to his assembled officers. I challenge Earth to single combat, their greatest warrior against me, broadcast to every world in the galaxy. When I defeat their champion, all will remember why they feared the Vorthak Empire. Commander Velnoth shifted nervously. Admiral, are you certain this is wise? It is the ancient way, Zexthul replied firmly. Personal combat between leaders. When I crush their warrior, the rebellions will, and in proper order will be restored. On Earth, President Thompson received the challenge with a mixture of surprise and amusement. He sat in the Oval Office with Ambassador Collins, General Brown, and Dr. Foster, discussing the alien's latest dramatic gesture. So he wants to fight. Our best warrior in single combat? President Thompson asked. And he thinks this will somehow restore his empire? Ambassador Collins nodded. The challenge was very formal, very traditional. It seems to be an important part of their culture. General Brown leaned forward. Mr. President, we could send one of our Special Forces operators, Navy SEALs, Delta Force, someone with combat training. That's exactly what he expects, Dr. Foster interrupted. He wants a traditional fight where he can demonstrate physical superiority. But what if we don't give him what he expects? What do you mean? President Thompson asked. Dr. Foster smiled. What if we send a comedian? The room fell silent for a moment. Then Ambassador Collins started to laugh. That's brilliant. He's expecting a warrior, but we send someone whose weapon is humor. It would be consistent with everything we've done so far, General Brown admitted. We've been treating this whole situation as a comedy from the beginning. President Thompson thought for a moment. Do we have anyone in mind? Actually, yes, Dr. Foster said. Eddie Martinez. He's a stand-up comedian, but he's also a former Marine. He understands both humor and combat. 3 days later, Eddie Martinez stood on the deck of a space shuttle, looking out at the massive Vorthak flagship. He wore a simple black suit instead of armor, and carried a microphone instead of a weapon. You know, he said to the camera crew that was broadcasting the event to Earth and throughout the galaxy. When I was a kid, I always wanted to be famous. I just never thought it would be for roasting an alien emperor. The shuttle docked with the Vorthak vessel, and Eddie was escorted to the combat arena. It was a vast chamber with crystalline walls that amplified sound and projected images to viewers across the galaxy. Admiral Zexthul stood at one end, 8 feet tall and gleaming, like a living diamond. Human warrior, the Admiral began, his voice echoing through the chamber. You face the might of the Vorthak Empire. Prepare for defeat. Eddie walked to the center of the arena and tapped his microphone. Is this thing on? Good. Ladies and gentlemen, beings of all species, welcome to the galaxy's first ever alien comedy roast. The Admiral paused, clearly confused. This is single combat, not entertainment. Oh, I know. Eddie replied cheerfully. But here's the thing, Admiral. You challenged Earth's greatest warrior, and humanity's greatest weapon has always been our ability to laugh at things that take themselves too seriously. Eddie began to pace around the arena like he was on stage at a comedy club. So let's talk about the Vorthak Empire, shall we? 3,000 years of galactic domination, and your big strategy is to stand around looking dramatic while playing scary music. The audience watching across the galaxy could hear laughter beginning to ripple through the broadcast. Not just from Earth, but from rebel worlds throughout the former empire. I mean, seriously, Eddie continued. You guys spent 47 seconds charging your weapons to blow up an empty mining station. My grandmother could dodge those shots, and she's been dead for 10 years. Admiral Zexthul's crystal form darkened. With rage. You mock the ancient traditions of combat. Ancient traditions? Dude, you're like that guy at the gym who grunts really loud while lifting weights so everyone will look at him. Except instead of weights, you're lifting entire star systems. And instead of impressing people, you're making them laugh. Eddie turned to address the camera directly. And can we talk about the costumes? I've seen Broadway productions with smaller budgets. Every time this guy wants to threaten someone, he has to stop and change into his threatening outfit. The laughter was growing louder now, coming from across the galaxy as billions of beings watched the mighty Admiral Zexthul being systematically roasted by a human with a microphone. You know what the real problem is? Eddie asked, walking closer to the bewildered alien. You built an entire empire on fear, but you forgot that fear only works if people respect you. And it's really hard to respect someone who needs mood lighting and background music just to tell people to surrender. Admiral Zexthul raised his arms dramatically, energy crackling around his crystalline form. Enough! I will destroy you. There it is, Eddie shouted. The dramatic arm gesture. I've been waiting for that one. Tell me, do you practice that in the mirror? Do you have a whole routine worked out? The energy around Zexthul flickered and died. For the first time in his very long life, the Admiral found himself completely unable to respond. Everything he had been trained to do, every instinct for intimidation and control was useless against someone who simply refused to be intimidated. In the silence that followed, something unprecedented happened. Commander Velnoth, watching from the observation deck, began to laugh. It started as a quiet crystal chime but grew louder and more musical. Soon, other Vorthak officers were joining in. You know what? Admiral Zexthul said finally, his voice much quieter than before. You're right, we do look ridiculous. The admission sent shockwaves through the galaxy. The mighty Admiral Zexthul, terror of the spaceways, had just agreed that his empire was basically a cosmic joke. Eddie walked over and offered his hand to the alien. Hey, it's okay. Everyone takes themselves too seriously sometimes. The trick is learning to laugh about it. Zexthul looked at the offered hand, then slowly reached out with his own crystalline appendage. When they shook hands, the arena erupted in cheers from across the galaxy. 6 months later, the former Vorthak Empire had become the Galactic Cooperative. Admiral Zexthul, now calling himself simply Zex, worked alongside Ambassador Collins to help former Imperial worlds establish democratic governments. The transformation wasn't always smooth. Some worlds struggled with the concept of self-governance after centuries of authoritarian rule. But Earth's cultural exchange program, led by teams of teachers, comedians, and political scientists, helped guide the transition. Eddie Martinez became the galaxy's first interspecies comedian, performing shows that featured both human and alien performers. His signature bit was still his impression of the old imperial style, complete with dramatic gestures and bombastic proclamations. President Thompson stood in the Rose Garden with Zex, watching a group of human and alien children playing together. During a cultural exchange visit, "You know," Zex said, his crystal form now reflecting lighter, happier colors, "I spent 3,000 years trying to make people fear me, but I've learned something interesting about your species." "What's that?" President Thompson asked. "Humans would rather be friends with someone than afraid of them. It's a much better way to live." In the distance, they could hear laughter as Eddie Martinez taught a group of young Vorthak the art of stand-up comedy. The lesson seemed to be going well, judging by the musical chiming sounds that passed for laughter among the crystal beings. The galaxy had learned an important lesson. Fear might conquer worlds, but laughter could liberate them. And sometimes, the best way to defeat an enemy was to help them learn how to laugh at themselves. As President Thompson often said in his speeches about the transformation, it turns out that the most powerful weapon in the universe isn't a death ray or a superweapon. It's a good sense of humor and the courage to use it.